Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, food, but maybe not in the way you usually hear about it.
Right. We're not here with the latest diet fad or, a magic bullet supplement.
No, definitely not. Our mission today is sort of, well, it's ambitious. We want to cut through all that noise, the trends, the confusing studies, the advice that changes every other week.
And perform like a rescue operation. We're trying to bring back something that's been lost. The wisdom embedded in cultural food rules.
Exactly. Because let's be honest, a lot of people listening probably feel completely lost about what to eat. There's just so much information, and it often contradicts itself.
It's information overload, pure and simple. And we've got, well, a stack of sources here suggesting something kind of radical these days, that those complex, traditional cultural ways of eating, they're actually better guides to health and, importantly, sustainability than a lot of the lab science we hear about.
Okay, let's unpack that term straight away. Reductionist laboratory science. What does that actually mean when we're talking about food?
Good question. It's basically the approach of breaking food and eating down into the smallest possible parts, like isolating vitamin C or measuring calcium in milligrams or focusing obsessively on one single nutrient.
So, ignoring the bigger picture?
Totally.
Yeah.
It ignores the whole system.
Hmm?
You know, where the food came from, how it was cooked, who you're eating with, the whole ritual around it. It's like analyzing a single gear without understanding how the whole clock works.
Right. And the problem is, we kind of crave that simple answer, don't we? That one miracle nutrient or that breakthrough study.
We do. And our sources point out that, well, reporters and even researchers often gravitate towards those single nutrient stories. Is vitamin E the key? Does calcium prevent this specific thing? It makes for a splashy headline.
Compared to
Compared to the boring but consistently true advice like, eat your vegetables or maybe cook dinner at home sometimes. That's seen as constant, sure, but also kind of dull. Not exciting.
And this hunt for the magic bullet, this reductionist approach, has, according to our sources, led us into, well, a bit of a mess.
A huge mess. Historically, health wasn't protected by nutrition labels. It was protected by these really intricate cultural rules. Rules about when you ate, how you ate, who you ate with. It was all woven into the fabric of society.
Health was part of the social structure itself, like a safety net built into everyday life.
Precisely. So the goal of this deep dive isn't to hand you another diet plan. Absolutely not.
It's more about giving you a different lens, a way to understand that eating used to be this highly ritualized communal thing. And those rituals, the ones we've mostly forgotten, they were actually our best guide for health and for the planet, too.
So let's dig into that. Let's look at why those seemingly simple rituals matter so much more than we think.
Okay, yeah. Where do we start? The kitchen itself.
I think that's the perfect place. If you could time travel back, into more traditional homes, especially in farming communities, the kitchen wasn't just a room. It was the absolute heart of the house.
The center of gravity, emotionally and physically.
Totally. Our sources describe it as a place where something was always simmering, baking, roasting, rising, or something. Food prep wasn't an afterthought you squeezed in. It was this continuous central part of life. It set the rhythm for the whole day.
And now, we've kind of swapped it out, haven't we?
We really have. The sources talk about this massive cultural shift. The entertainment center, the TV, the consoles, the screens, that's the hub now.
Yeah.
That immediate hit from streaming or gaming has pushed aside, actually knowing how to cook.
It's an outsourcing of complexity. We traded skill for convenience. And the result is, sadly, a lot of people today really struggle to make a meal from scratch ingredients.
And this isn't just about losing a practical skill, though that's part of it.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changes how we eat. And that affects how our bodies even know when they're full.
Ah, right. The whole ritual aspect.
Exactly. When eating is this social, ritualized thing, you sit down, maybe at a table, you talk, you pass dishes, you naturally eat slower. That process actually helps our internal satiety mechanisms.
Okay, satiety mechanisms. Let's break that down for the listener. What are we talking about physiologically? How does a ritual make you feel full?
We're talking about the signals your body uses to say, okay, I've had enough. Hormones, nerve signals from your gut to your brain. When you wolf down food really fast, maybe standing up or in front of a screen, your gut and brain just don't have time to catch up.
The message gets delayed.
Right. But eating slowly, which happens almost automatically when you're talking and sharing, gives your body the time it needs to register the food. Hormones like leptin get released, signaling fullness before you've massively overeaten.
So that old advice, eat slowly, be mindful, it wasn't just about manners, it was actually a built-in physiological control.
A really effective one.
Yeah.
It worked against overeating without anyone needing to count calories.
Amazing. And to really get the weight of these rituals, you mentioned we need to talk about a fork.
Mhm.
Seems mundane, but you're saying it carries huge cultural baggage.
Oh, absolutely. The fork is surprisingly controversial. Historically speaking, it's not just a tool, it's loaded with social meaning.
And you found some pretty wild anecdotes about this.
Two incredible ones. The first is from Soulfire Farm, a community-focused farm. They had this immersion program, right?
Yeah.
And during it, something strange happened. The participants felt that the land itself, which they personified as Azaka, the Haitian spirit of agriculture, was displeased
Displeased by what?
by the visitors using forks during meals. Azaka, or the spirit of the place, was apparently confused and upset by what was seen as arrogance.
Arrogance because of a fork. How?
The interpretation was that the fork creates distance, a barrier between the eater, the food, and the earth that grew it. It implied a kind of detachment, maybe a lack of humility in receiving the food.
Wow. So it was seen as a technological barrier breaking a connection.
Exactly, almost like a symbol of class or technological superiority, getting in the way of a relationship with the source of sustenance. And get this, the community listened. They switched to eating with their hands for those meals. And the sources say, all was well with the land again. It's a powerful story about how even a simple tool choice can be read as a statement about your connection, or lack thereof, to the food system.
That's incredible. And it wasn't just a spiritual thing, right? The fork caused social uproar in Europe, too.
Oh, big time. When it first showed up, it was often this fancy luxury item. Using it was seen as showing off, as totally effective.
People were actually scornful.
Yes, our sources say it drew ire or scorn. People thought it was a pointless piece of affectation. What's wrong with your hands? Or a knife and spoon. We've been doing fine. It marked you out.
And we still see echoes of that judgment today, don't we? In those subtle differences in how people use forks, like the North American versus the British style.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, the North American style. Fork in the left to hold, knife in the right to cut. Then you put the knife down, switch the fork to your right hand to actually eat the bite. Seems efficient, maybe.
Versus the traditional British way.
Where you keep the fork in your left hand, tines down usually, and you kind of squash the food onto the back of it. Even tricky things like peas.
I've seen that. It looks difficult.
It requires skill. And for a certain generation or class in Britain, doing it correctly was a sign of good manners. The American switch was seen as a bit, well, maybe convenient, but not quite proper.
So even these tiny details of how we wield a utensil are packed with cultural signals and history.
They really are. They act like a kind of social architecture. They structure the meal, sure, but they also subtly structure social interactions. And it's not just tools, it's drinks too. Certain beverages became cornerstones of social life.
Like beer, for instance. Its history goes way back.
Way, way back. For ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, beer wasn't just for fun. It was a staple food, the staple drink of the working man.
Yeah.
Often safer than the water, too.
And the social customs around it, like toasting.
They're ancient, rooted in beer's long association with shared, friendly, communal moments. It literally brought people together, lubricated social exchange. It's been doing that for millennia.
And then coffee had a different, maybe more intellectual social role later on.
Definitely. Think 17th century Europe. The coffee house wasn't just a place to get a caffeine fix. It was the nerve center of information.
The internet of the age of reason, as one source called it.
Exactly. News, gossip, business deals, philosophical debates, it all happened there. And they were incredibly democratic spaces for the time.
Penny universities.
Right, because anyone, supposedly, could join the conversation for the price of a coffee. It broke down social barriers and fueled the exchange of ideas, all built around the shared ritual of drinking coffee together.
It really shows how these cultural rituals created and maintain social structures.
They absolutely did, which makes it even more striking how, as our sources argue, the rise of the modern Western diet just kind of bulldozed these clear cultural scripts.
Right. It replaced that structure, the slow meals, the etiquette, the communal hubs, with something much more chaotic.
Yeah, replaced it with confusing, often contradictory scientific advice that feels totally disconnected from lived experience.
Okay, so this is where we get into the industrial detour, as the outline calls it. How did the science itself get so confusing?
Well, once we lost those clear cultural rules about how and when to eat, we fell into this trap of reductionist nutrition we talked about earlier. And the way science gets reported and even funded seems almost designed to create confusion.
We touched on the media liking splashy, single-nutrient headlines. But what about the actual studies? Especially the big ones looking at diet and disease in Western countries.
Here's the really crucial and maybe slightly depressing insight from the sources. Those studies often struggle to find clear, strong links. One week fat is bad, the next it's carbs, then sugar. It feels like whiplash.
Why? Why is it so hard to get a clear answer from Western studies?
Because, and this is the key point, almost everyone in those studies is already eating the standard Western diet, the diet that causes diseases of affluence, as some call it.
Wait, hang on. So if pretty much all the subjects are eating food high in processed stuff, sugar, refined grains, industrial oils, how can you find meaningful differences between them related to just one nutrient?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's the argument. If everyone's already eating a diet that's fundamentally, kind of broken, the small variations between individuals, maybe one eats slightly more vitamin E than another, get drowned out by the overall noise of the poor diet.
It's like trying to study the effects of slightly different poisons when everyone's already being poisoned.
That's a harsh way to put it, but yeah, that's the analogy. The baseline diet is already so far from optimal that the subtle differences the studies are looking for often don't show up statistically over the long term.
So to get clarity, you need studies that look at really different diets.
Exactly. Studies that compare populations with genuinely contrasting eating patterns, like the China study, which is mentioned. It looked at huge dietary variations across different regions in China.
What did that find? More consistency.
Much more. It consistently found patterns like, diets higher in animal foods tended to correlate with higher blood cholesterol, while diets higher in whole plant foods correlated with lower levels. When you have real dietary contrast, the picture becomes clearer.
But that clear picture gets muddied here in the West, partly because of the baseline diet and partly because of industry influence.
Oh, hugely. The financial power imbalance is just staggering.
How staggering are we talking?
Think about the advertising budget for just one major national food product, like a big cereal brand or a popular snack food. Our sources state that budget can be anywhere from 10 to 50 times larger than the entire amount the federal government spends on nutrition education for the whole country in a year.
50 times
Yeah.
for one product.
Yes. So the messages you hear, the ones repeated constantly, backed by sophisticated marketing, are overwhelmingly commercial ones, pushing processed products. Public health advice barely gets a whisper in edgewise.
And even when the government tries to issue clear advice, the industry pushes back.
Hard. There's a really telling example in the sources about the guidelines for added sugars.
What happened there?
The scientific panel's initial recommendation was pretty direct. Something along the lines of, go easy on added sugars. Clear, restrictive advice.
Makes sense.
But the industry lobbyists went into overdrive. Food companies argued that the science wasn't strong enough for such negative language, that the minimum burden of scientific proof hadn't been met. Basically, they fought any wording that might hurt sales.
So what ended up in the official guidelines given to the public?
It got completely watered down, that direct go easy warning, gone, replaced with something much softer, more positive sounding. Choose beverages and foods to moderate your intake of sugars.
So it shifts the burden entirely onto the consumer. You choose moderately instead of warning about the products themselves.
Exactly. It sounds reasonable, but it lacks any real teeth. It's a classic case of industry pressure successfully softening public health advice to protect profits.
It's not just the lobbying and ads, though. The sources argue the whole structure of our modern food system erodes trust and accountability.
Yeah, think about the difference between your average giant supermarket today and, say, an old-fashioned local market.
Okay. Supermarket. Anonymous, vast choice, maybe not much connection to where things came from. Local market.
The local market historically was an exchange of knowledge and values, as one source puts it. You knew the farmer or the butcher. You could talk to them.
So, if your grandmother thought the carrots looked a bit dodgy one week, she could actually tell the farmer directly, and they'd have to listen.
Precisely. The buyer had real influence. The producer was directly accountable to the community they served. That close relationship kept standards higher, arguably.
And when you lose that, when it's all anonymous, global supply chains.
Standards can slip. The sources argue that most food scandals, contamination issues, questionable farming practices happen because the main driver becomes cutting costs, often globally. People end up cutting corners behind the scenes in ways that just wouldn't have been possible or acceptable when the farmer had to look their customer in the eye.
And this disconnect is amplified by hyperurbanism. That's a striking term. Cities as entropic black holes. What does that mean for food?
Entropy means disorder, decline. A black hole pulls everything in. So the idea is that these massive cities become consumption machines. They suck in resources, food, energy, materials from vast surrounding areas, even globally.
Without giving much back ecologically.
Right. They consume the output of huge regions, but return mostly waste. The city's hinterland, the area that feeds it, stops being local. It becomes the entire planet. This completely breaks that old reciprocal relationship between a community and the specific land that supports it. It erases local knowledge, local accountability.
Wow. Okay, so that paints a pretty bleak picture of industrial food losing its way, losing connection, which sets up the next part. If the system is chaotic, how do we fight back?
And this is where, it gets really interesting. The sources propose something quite powerful, that the most effective countermove is actually cooking from scratch.
As a political act, almost.
Yes, reclaiming the kitchen is framed as fundamentally political. And scratch cooking is defined super simply. Just using unprocessed ingredients to make something to eat. That's it.
So not necessarily complicated gourmet stuff.
Not at all. It's about the choice of ingredients. By choosing whole, unprocessed foods, you automatically sidestep a lot of the industrial food complex. You're voting with your fork, essentially, for simpler, more transparent food chains.
And doing that naturally pushes us back towards older ways of eating, towards the wisdom in traditional practices.
It really does, because traditional cooking wasn't just random recipes. It was based on deep knowledge of ingredients, seasonality, and place.
Like the example about beef availability.
Yeah, historically, beef might have been more common in spring or summer because that's when local butchering happened. It was often cheaper then, too. People would cook a big roast, eat it hot, then use the cold slices for days. And the sources emphasize the quality locally raised beef had such good flavor, apparently, that none ever went to waste. A different beast, pardon the pun, from much of today's mass-market meat.
That attention to the ingredient itself comes through in the seasoning rules, too, like for mutton.
Right. The advice was super specific. Only salt, pepper, and a little thyme for mutton. Why? Because, the source claims, mutton has this unique, special flavor, almost exotic, that stronger seasonings would actually ruin.
That's not just a recipe preference, that's deep ingredient knowledge, knowing how to enhance, not mask.
Exactly. Passed down through generations. And this deep knowledge extended to preservation, too. Think about hog butchering. It was a major event, and absolutely nothing was wasted.
They had complex ways to use everything.
Incredibly complex and efficient. Making sausage cakes, for instance, seasoned ground meat packed into jars. But even more sophisticated was something called liver pudding.
Okay, tell us about liver pudding. Doesn't sound immediately appealing to modern ears, maybe, but you're saying it was skilled.
Highly skilled. It was described as a delicate pâté. Made from finely ground liver and jowl fat, the fat was key, making it softer and lighter, seasoned carefully with sage and onion.
So turning humble ingredients into something refined through technique and knowledge.
Precisely. These weren't just ways to use leftovers. They were sophisticated preservation techniques that maximized nutrition and flavor from every single part of the animal. It reflects a profound respect for the resource itself.
And this respect for resources, this connection to the process, leads directly from the kitchen back out to the field, doesn't it? To critiques of modern industrial agriculture.
Absolutely. The sources bring in Wendell Berry's powerful critique here. He basically argues that modern agriculture is, in his words, a disaster.
Strong word. What makes it a disaster in his view?
He argues it's built on a series of dangerous substitutions. We've substituted energy, mostly fossil fuels, for knowledge. We've substituted methodology, rigid industrial processes for genuine care. And crucially, we've substituted technology for morality.
Okay, technology for morality. That feels like a really important distinction. Can you unpack that? What's the moral dimension of farming that technology bypasses?
Morality in farming, in this view, means having an ethical connection to the land, the animals, the community, understanding limits, knowing you can only take what the ecosystem can sustainably give, treating the soil and the creatures with respect.
And industrial tech lets you ignore that?
It allows you to. If your soil is depleted from monocropping, instead of rebuilding it through careful practices, which takes knowledge and time, you just pour on synthetic fertilizer. That's substituting technology, the fertilizer, for the knowledge and care needed for long-term soil health. The technology provides a shortcut that bypasses the deeper responsibility. You get the yield this year, but the long-term health of the land suffers.
Which is why the sources champion smaller, local, more regenerative farms as an ethical and practical alternative.
Exactly. Small farms, especially ones focused on local markets, are presented as vital. They help create, as one source says, local autonomies from global flows of capital. They have to adapt to their specific local environment to sustain the ecological base they depend on. They can't just rely on global inputs and outputs in the same way. Their accountability is more grounded.
And that grounding literally starts in the ground, right? With the soil itself.
Fundamentally, there's this amazing idea presented. All farming is ultimately livestock farming.
Even if you're growing vegetables, how does that work?
Because whether you're growing plants or grazing animals, you are relying on and managing the billions of living organisms in the soil, the bacteria, the fungi, the worms. That's your real livestock. Our sources quote the mind-blowing fact that a single handful of healthy soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth.
Wow. So the health of our food system literally rests on managing that invisible underground herd.
That's the argument. And the key to managing it, to a regenerative future, lies in understanding the complexity, especially these symbiotic relationships, like with mycorrhizal fungi.
Right, the fungi. Sounds technical. Can you give us a simple way to picture what they do?
Think of them as the soil's internet, or maybe like a vast underground trading network. These fungi form these incredibly fine threads called hyphae that extend way beyond a plant's roots.
Okay, like a network connecting different plants.
Exactly. They connect whole communities of plants, and they act like miners and delivery trucks. They gather essential nutrients and water from the soil, things the plant roots might not reach easily, and deliver them directly to the plants.
And what do the fungi get in return? It's a trade, you said.
They get energy. The plants, through photosynthesis, create carbon sugars, and they trade some of those sugars to the fungi in exchange for the nutrients. It's this amazing win-win. The fungi get fed, and the plants get access to a vastly larger pool of resources, allowing them to thrive.
So cooperation, not just competition, is key underground. Nature's model is connection and complexity.
Precisely. It's far more efficient and resilient than the simplified, competitive model of industrial monoculture.
And here's the kicker. This complex ecological approach isn't just good for the planet, it's actually more profitable.
That's one of the most stunning points in the sources. They provide hard numbers. There's this example of Brown's Ranch in North Dakota, which uses these regenerative practices focusing on soil health, diversity, no-tilling, integrating livestock.
And their profit margin.
They report making about $93 profit per acre.
Okay. And how does that compare to a typical industrial farm in the U.S.?
The average American farm, often reliant on those chemical inputs, monocultures, heavy tillage, makes only around $10 profit per acre. Sometimes less, sometimes relying on subsidies just to break even.
$93 versus $10, that's not a small difference.
It's enormous, an $83 per acre difference. It completely flips the script that industrial efficiency is the only way to make money in farming. It suggests the real efficiency lies in working with natural complexity, not against it.
So let's extrapolate that. If more farms adopted these regenerative methods, what would the economic impact be nationally?
It would be transformative. The U.S. has roughly 900 million acres in agricultural production. If those acres performed like Brown's Ranch, focusing on soil health and reducing costly inputs,
Instead of costing taxpayers money through subsidies.
U.S. agriculture could potentially generate around $90 billion in profit annually. It suggests that aligning with ecological principles isn't just ethical, it's actually sound economics. The industrial path might be chemically intensive, but it seems financially and ecologically unsustainable in the long run.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've journeyed from the confusion of modern nutrition science back to the wisdom encoded in cultural food rules and rituals.
Right, the big takeaway seems to be that the clarity we're looking for isn't in the next isolated nutrient study. It's in rediscovering those older patterns, the communal meals, the traditional recipes, the connection to where food comes from, the importance of how we eat, not just what.
That cultural wisdom offered a kind of built-in resilience and health guidance that reductionist science, often influenced by industry, struggles to replicate.
And we've seen that reclaiming these traditions, especially the simple act of cooking from scratch, isn't just nostalgic. It's presented as a powerful way to push back against the negative aspects of the industrial food system and that entropic black hole of hyperurbanism.
By choosing whole ingredients, by engaging in the labor of cooking, we automatically foster a different relationship with food, one based more on connection, accountability, and respect for the entire chain, from the soil microbes up.
It forces us to slow down, to value complexity over simplistic shortcuts, which seems to be the key lesson for health, whether it's the health of our gut microbes, our communities, or the land itself.
It's all interconnected. So the challenge isn't finding the one perfect scientific answer, but maybe embracing the complexity that culture already figured out.
Exactly. Which leads us to a final thought, a question really, for you listening. If complexity and connection in our bodies, our social lives, the soil, are truly the roots of health and, well, maybe even dignity, what's one simplifying modern convenience, one shortcut that you might be willing to give up, even just for this week, to try to restore a little bit of that connection?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe it's deciding to cook one extra meal from scratch. Maybe it's putting away the phone during dinner.
Could be anything.
Bruh.
But that conscious choice to slow down, to engage, might be the first step back towards reclaiming that deeper wisdom we've been talking about, the wisdom that perhaps science overlooks.